May was only a few days away. Eva Harris looked out the window of the hospital corridor and watched the sparrows splashing in the puddles in the yard. A cat was walking slowly along the fence. It headed straight for the sparrows, crouched, and was about to jump. Eva noticed the cat, opened the window, and shouted at the striped hunter. The cat and the sparrows broke away, causing a loud noise in the hospital backyard. "Why are you making so much noise?" said the nurse, passing by angrily. "It's a quiet hour. Don't disturb other patients Don't disturb people. Other patients are trying to sleep. Come on, go to your ward." Eva smiled, pulled a paper from her pocket, and showed it to the nurse. "I've already been discharged," she explained. "I'm waiting for my husband, and I'm sorry about the noise. I won't do it again." The nurse told her to go downstairs and wait for her husband in the hall. Eva went downstairs obediently, and in a few minutes she was already sitting in an uncomfortable chair, stroking her rounded belly. People were passing by. They scurried back and forth, opening and closing the front door. Eva looked at their faces, hoping to see her husband, Austin, among them, but he was still not there. Eva looked at her watch for the 100th time and took out her phone to call a cab, but then changed her mind when she saw two girls sitting nearby talking. The girls were talking quietly, leaning into each other, but Eva could hear most of their conversation. "I have no idea why I need this baby," one of the girls said, looking at her belly grudgingly. "Mason drinks but doesn't work anywhere, and I have to work from dawn till dusk at 2 jobs. My mother was right. I should have had an abortion, but Mason said no." "But it's a great sin," her companion said, grimacing sorely. "They say that it makes life very hard. You can't sleep and get all sorts of diseases. It's a terrible thing." The first girl smiled bitterly, then suddenly got serious and looked at her companion. "Isn't it a sin to have a child you can't provide for?" she said. "Isn't it a terrible thing to have a salary below minimum wage? I have a tiny dorm room and no hope of a bright future. You know, I'd tax all those humanists who talk about sins and suffering. Let them support people like me." The girl whispered something else, but Eva couldn't hear it. She stood up from her chair, got her outerwear from the check room, and headed outside. Despite the warm and sunny day, Eva felt dark and cold inside. The conversation between the two strangers made her anxious for her future. Even though Eva was sure she would be fine, she and her husband Austin worked for the same company. Austin made good money and could provide for not just one child, but even triplets if he had to. Eva was making good money as well, and she was already financially independent. Eva knew that she was definitely not in danger of poverty, but she felt something gloomy inside, some kind of hopelessness and alienation. She felt as if she found herself alone on another planet. Sitting in a cab, she looked longingly at the gray houses. The same gray, featureless people lived there. They lived, rejoiced, grieved, loved, suffered, and died. Eva had never cared about them before, but now she was suddenly interested in them. "I used to be like them, and no one cared about me either," Eva thought, and stared out the window again. When she was a child, her greatest dream was to have a father. She had Aunt Meredith instead of her mother. Meredith adopted little Eva when her mother passed away. Aunt Meredith knew nothing about Eva's father. Her sister Evelyn was secretive and did not say anything about her personal life. Besides, she lived in another city and saw her sister only a few times a year. Evelyn gave birth to Eva out of wedlock. To provide for her daughter, she went into huge debts, which she was never able to repay. She killed herself by taking a pack of sleeping pills. After her sister's funeral, Meredith adopted her orphan niece and made every effort to replace her mother. She succeeded. After learning to speak, Eva began to call Meredith her mother, thus rewarding her for all her efforts. When she reached school age, Eva often asked her aunt why there was no man in their house. All her classmates had fathers, older brothers, uncles, grandfathers, but Eva had only Meredith and no one else. Men never paid any attention to Meredith, so she only shrugged her shoulders and laughed it off. When you grow up, you can get yourself a husband. Although, I'd rather get a dog or a cat, was her typical answer. Eva was a child, so she didn't know what Meredith was talking about. But time passed. In high school and then at the university, she discovered what love, affection, hate, and separation were. But it all turned out to be trivial and naively childish when she met Austin, her future husband. It was when Eva had already graduated and got a job as a manager in one of the companies. She was still living with her aunt in a small apartment, not wanting to move to a new place, either because of her strong attachment to Meredith or because it was very close to her office. One day, on her way home from work, Eva stopped by the amusement park, strolled along the boardwalk, fed the stray dogs, and was about to go home when she noticed a guy sitting on the ground. It was the end of September, but the guy was dressed not warmly enough. He was wearing a tattered wool sweater, dirty jeans, and torn sneakers. But it was not his appearance that shocked her, but his eyes that were eagerly watching the dogs eat the sausage. It seemed to Eva that he was about to attack the dogs and take their food from them. Feeling the girl's gaze on him, he looked away from the dogs and tried to look serious. He leaned back imposingly, crossed his legs, and waved coquettishly at Eva. She came over, sat down next to him, and asked what happened to him. "Nothing, just relaxing, watching the sunset," the boy said jokingly and laughed, but then a severe cough erupted from his throat and made the boy bend down. "You might have pneumonia," Eva said. When the boy coughed, "You should see a doctor before it's too late." The boy tried to look serious again and waved his hand carelessly. "It's all right, it happens to me sometimes," he explained. Eva nodded and noticed a box with some coins at the bottom of it, standing near his feet. The guy immediately kicked the box away with his foot, but it was too late. The girl had seen it. "I see. You're homeless," Eva realized, shaking her head. "So what happened to you?" The guy started making excuses, saying he was fine and actually he wasn't homeless. He was looking for some adventure and wanted to live on the streets for a while, just out of boredom. "So I'm all right and there's nothing to worry about. He didn't finish. The coughing came back even worse than before. He fell to his knees and grabbed his chest, trying to numb the unbearable pain. Eva rushed to help him, and when she touched his hand, she pulled her palm away. The guy was hot as an iron. "All right, come with me," Eva said sternly, holding the poor man by the waist. "We need to bring your temperature down right away, or you won't make it through the morning." She waved to a passing cab, pulled the boy into it, and told the cab driver to drive as fast as he could. Upon arriving home, Eva put the sick man to bed and forced him to take some antipyretic. "By the way, my name is Austin," the boy said hoarsely, squinting his eyes from the bright light. "What's yours?" Eva told him her name, and the boy fell asleep after repeating Eva's name several times. In the morning, Austin recovered a little. The fever that had been bothering him for days was gone, and the coughing was not bothering him as much as yesterday. At breakfast, when Eva served him in bed, Austin confessed to her that he was not an adventurer, but the victim of a robbery. It turned out that he arrived here to apply for a job 2 weeks ago, and was met at the train station by a cab driver. He offered Austin a very cheap ride, and he bought it. The cabbie took him to a vacant lot outside the city where his friends were waiting. They beat Austin badly, took everything he had, including his clothes, and left him there. "But why didn't you just go to the police?" Eva asked. "Those bastards must have left the city by now." "I did," Austin answered gloomily. "I went to the police as soon as I came to my senses, but they refused to accept my statement. They didn't believe me and said that apparently I drank it all away myself, and now I'm just making up tall tales. Tell me, do I look like a drunk?" the boy asked. Eva looked into Austin's pale face and shook her head. "I don't think so," she replied, "though I could be wrong." Austin laughed and began to tell her about his parents living in the village, his school and university years, and many other things he had long wanted to share with someone. Eva silently listened to his long, frank monologue while minding her own business, and Austin kept talking. "Where are your parents?" Austin suddenly asked, making Eva feel uncomfortable. "I don't have parents," Eva answered after a short pause. "I only have an aunt. She's out of the city now, so meeting her will have to wait." Austin wanted to ask about her parents, but he considered it inappropriate, so he shut up. Thanks to Eva's care, the boy fully recovered in a few days. Eva lent him some more money to restore his ID and rent an apartment, and promised that she would try to find him a job at the company she worked for. After a couple more days, her aunt came back. She noticed that Eva had changed a lot during her absence and asked what happened, but Eva just smiled mysteriously. Eva didn't want to say anything about Austin, at least until he was back on his feet and their relationship was clear. Eva didn't have to wait long for that. A month later, Austin got his first paycheck and invited Eva to a restaurant where he proposed. Then there was the wedding, moving into a new apartment, and the news that she was pregnant. It was all happening so fast that Eva's head was spinning. Constancy came into her life only at the hospital, where Eva came for a checkup before the delivery. There, talking to other pregnant women and doctors, she realized that the greatest happiness was yet to come. Everything else was just a short prelude. Stopping a cab halfway home, Eva asked the cab driver to take her to the office. She hadn't been there in almost a month. She missed the work environment and her colleagues. She also wanted to see their reactions to her arrival, to listen to all sorts of congratulations, to feel the surprised, maybe even envious glances. Eva had never been ambitious. She was not too fond of publicity, and she didn't pay much attention to the opinions of others. But now, for some reason, she wanted to be at the center of attention. The pregnancy was probably the reason for that. Once there, Eva paid for the ride, walked up the slippery steps, and opened the front door of the office building. Once inside, she was surprised to see the empty lobby. She asked the board security guard where all the people had gone. "It's a short day," the man explained, not taking his eyes off the TV. "Tomorrow is some holiday." Eva realized that she could get nothing more out of the guard, so she told him she needed to pick up some personal belongings and headed up to the second floor. The stairs and corridors were unusually quiet and dark, as if the building had been abandoned. When she approached the door of her office, Eva stopped, wondering if she wanted to go inside or not. Suddenly, she remembered that she had no keys, and smiling at her own forgetfulness, was about to leave, when suddenly the silence was broken by someone's moans. Eva walked slowly, trying not to tap her heels. The moans came from the CEO's office. Eva looked through the keyhole and saw nothing. But she heard a man's voice, and that man's voice sounded very familiar to her. "Austin? I can't believe it. No, it's not him," she thought. Eva knocked on the door, then grabbed the doorknob and dared to step inside. The scene she saw was like some silly theatrical production that couldn't be true. There were only two characters in this play: her husband, Austin, and the CEO's daughter, Stacy. Both were half naked, and when they saw Eva, they awkwardly covered themselves with whatever came to hand. "Austin!" Eva gasped, looking at her husband and at Stacy. "What's going on here?" Austin, covering himself with a folder, somehow pulled his pants on and stretched out his hand to his wife. "I can explain everything," he exclaimed, covering the still naked Stacy. "Wait, damn, don't look at me like that!" Despite it, Eva kept looking at her husband with glazed eyes and remained silent. Then she slammed her fist into the computer on the desk with all her might and stepped back toward the door. "How could you do this to me?" she uttered, trying not to burst into tears. "And when did your affair begin? When I was in the hospital or before?" Austin rushed to his wife, but soon regretted it, because he got a slap that instantly burned his face. "Curse you, Austin," Eva hissed over her shoulder. "I'll never forgive you for that." She ran out the door, instantly went downstairs, and ran out of the building, frightening the security guard with her behavior. It felt like someone had poured liquid nitrogen into Eva's chest. She had never felt such a dead cold inside. The world around her had changed. The gray houses looked even more gray and dirty. The birds were silent, and the people passing by had dark, blurry spots instead of faces. These phantoms chased Eva all the way home. She ran into the apartment, collapsed on her knees, and wept. Meredith immediately understood everything and silently sat down on the floor next to Eva. They were sitting like that for a long time. Eva couldn't calm down. The resentment, hatred, and misunderstanding were tearing her apart. Suddenly, like a stab of a knife, a terrible pain pierced Eva's lower abdomen. She fell on her back and clutched at her stomach with her hands, screaming loudly in pain. The sharp pain didn't stop. Eva was about to lose consciousness. Meredith realized that her niece was in labor and ran to call an ambulance, and when she returned, Eva was already unconscious. Eva couldn't remember the childbirth process at all. It was all a blur. When the girl came to her senses, the nurse told her that she had had a boy and asked if she wanted to see him. Eva negatively shook her head and covered herself with a blanket. "What? You had such a difficult labor and you don't even want to look at the baby?" the nurse said in shock. Eva raised her head and looked at the nurse angrily, making her shut up. Then she told her to bring her son and leave her alone. The nurse brought her baby and immediately left the ward. Eva began to rock the baby in her arms and cried, looking at the tiny little human being who stretched out his arms to her. She suddenly remembered a recent conversation between two girls about the difficult fate. Now she found herself in the same situation. Eva had no husband now. Obviously, she didn't have a job now either. She had no idea what to do. She avoided meetings with her husband, or rather, now he was her ex-husband. He only showed up once in her life. She received a letter from Austin, asking for forgiveness. Without reading the letter to the end, Eva burned it. As she burned all the bridges connecting her to her ex-husband, she quit her job a week after her return, and a few months later, her high school friend, Jessica, invited Eva to go to work at a fish plant in the north of the country on a rotational basis. Jessica had worked there for almost 3 years, and thanks to that job, she found herself a husband. "Maybe you'll find someone too," Jessica slyly suggested when she heard about what had happened to Eva. "There are many great men in the north of the country. They're all healthy and strong, not like the guys down here." Eva had no interest in love affairs. She only wanted to ensure that her son would have a decent childhood and that Aunt Meredith would have a comfortable old age. And she immediately said yes, because the salary there was decent. Even the position of a janitor did not freak her out. She realized that the work at the fish factory would be very hard, but after learning that she would be paid 3 times more per month for her work than before, Eva was ready to go there right away. So after packing her bags and leaving her son, Alex, in her aunt's care, Eva set off for the north. She worked hard and dreamed of a bright future, trying to forget the past. But the past came back into her life like a storm. One day, Meredith called her with some shocking news. Her ex-husband, Austin, had been imprisoned. "What do you mean, imprisoned? What happened?" Eva was shocked. Her aunt only knew about what had happened from hearsay. She hesitated a little, remembering all the details. "They say he accepted a top position in the company," she finally said. "A CEO, I guess. He seemed to have succeeded, but God remembers old sins. Anyway, there was a price to pay for everything. Austin was accused of economic crime and imprisoned for 7 years. They say the company doesn't even exist anymore. Everyone has gone into hiding." Eva pictured her ex-husband in prison and felt unwell. She certainly wouldn't wish that on him. "I don't care about that. It's over between us. Why did you tell me about that? To make me feel sorry for him or something?" Eva replied irritably. Meredith mumbled into the phone that she just wanted to share the news with her. But Eva wasn't listening to her anymore. She put the phone in her pocket and looked up at the cloudless northern sky. A strange and unexpected thought occurred to her, that maybe somewhere far, far away on the other side of the country, Austin was also looking up at the sky and thinking about her. Eva pushed the thought out of her head and went back to work, picking up the fallen mop. The thought of her ex-husband disappeared as suddenly as it had occurred. 7 years had passed. Austin's prison term came to an end. He walked out the prison gates, accompanied by the prison guard. Austin took a deep breath of the December air, turned to the guard, and said goodbye to him. Then he put his hands up in the air and smiled. "That's it. I'm a free man now," he shouted at the top of his voice. "Free." Austin turned around and walked briskly down the road leading to the bus station without turning back. Austin slept all the way on the bus. He opened his eyes and looked out the window only when the old bus stopped with a creak. The city had changed a lot after all these years. Sitting at a table in a cafe and greedily eating grilled chicken, Austin thought about what he was going to do next. He had nowhere to go. His parents had died 2 years earlier, almost simultaneously. His father had passed away first, and after a couple of months, his mother passed away as well. Their house was probably in a terrible state now, and there was no point in going back there. Sure, he could look for a job here in this city, but Austin knew it was a waste of time. No one was likely to want an employee convicted of an economic crime. Completely absorbed in his gloomy thoughts, he forgot about the chicken and would hardly have remembered it if someone's little hand hadn't crawled up the table to it. Austin caught the hand and looked the thief straight in the eye. "Mister, let me go. I won't do it again," he said pleadingly, sniffing his nose. The man unclenched his fingers, and the boy immediately rushed to the exit, but he tripped over a table leg and fell, dropping several plates. The owner of the diner immediately took his shoulders, threatening to rip his ears off. He probably would have done it, but Austin stopped him. "Let the boy go," he said, handing the owner some money. "It's my fault. I scared the kid." He invited the boy to his table and pulled a plate of chicken to him. The boy greedily ate it, and soon there was nothing left on the plate. "When was the last time you ate?" Austin asked the child. The boy raised his palm, bent 3 fingers stained with grease, and showed them to Austin. 3 days ago, he said quietly. The man asked the waiter to bring some more food and began to ask the boy about his life. "My name is Alex," he introduced himself first. "I live with my mother. My grandmother used to live with us, but she died recently, and my mom got sick. She's bedridden now. I'm afraid she'll die too, just like Grandma." He was distracted by the waiter bringing and placing a bowl of hot soup in front of him. Alex clutched a spoon in his fist and began to eat quickly. "Don't eat so fast. Chew better," Austin said to him. "Alex, you know today is a very important day for me. I got out of prison today." Alex looked at him frightened and then asked, "What's prison?" The man was confused by this question. He didn't know what to say and then answered briefly, "Prison is a bad place to be. It would be better if you never knew what it is," he replied. "My dad is in prison too," Alex said sharply. "I've been waiting for him for a long time, but he's still not here. Mom says he's a fool for getting in there." Austin laughed, took money out of his pocket, then counted out a few banknotes and put them on the table. "And this is for you, Alex." He handed a couple of banknotes to the boy. "Buy medicines for your mom." "What's your mother's name?" The boy put the money away and smiled. "Eva," he answered. "And the last name is Harris. I'm Harris too." Alex quickly thanked the man and rushed to the exit. Austin followed the boy. He caught up with him at the exit and caught him by the shoulder. "Alex, you won't believe this," he exhaled, squatting down. "I happen to know your mom. We used to work together. I'm her friend, you know? I need to see her. Will you take me to her, huh?" Alex hesitated, but then agreed to take Austin home. Austin followed him. There was a hurricane in his head, and something ached in his chest. The boy led him to a shabby 3-story dormitory that used to belong to a college. Now the college had ceased to exist, and the dormitory was inhabited by all kinds of low-income citizens, orphans, people with disabilities, and retirees. Austin struggled to open the jammed door, let Alex go first, and found himself in a damp and musty-smelling building. "This is where we live," Alex said, smiling sadly. "Mom said we used to have our own big apartment. Then she and Grandma sold the apartment and moved here because we needed some money." The boy finished his story as he walked up to the door. The boy opened the door and stepped in. Austin stepped in after him, too. The room, as he noticed, was quite small and was very similar to his prison cell. There was an old bed next to the radiator by the window. His ex-wife, Eva, was lying on it, covered by a blanket. A similar bed, apparently belonging to Alex, stood against the other wall. A small coffee table scattered with empty medicine bottles and some books completed this meager interior. Mom! Your friend is here to see you," shouted Alex, stroking his mother's hand. "He gave me some money. Look!" The boy took money out of his pocket and put it on the table. Then he sat down on the bed and waited to see what would happen next. Eva looked with sleepy eyes at Austin, standing in front of her, and shrieked. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, pressing her back against the radiator. "How did you find me?" Austin pointed to Alex, then asked him to play in the hallway with the toy car. When they were alone in the room, the man sat down on the floor and was silent for a long time. "You know, Eva," he said without raising his eyes full of tears, "when I was in prison, I used to think about how bad it was. I also thought about betrayal and how I got set up at the company. It was Stacy and her father who set me up. But it was fair. Karma. The boomerang got me. I got what I deserved for my meanness. I wanted to go home, to be free. I wanted to start a new life. I dreamed that when I got out of prison, everything would be the same as before, or even better. But today I met Alex, my son, poor and hungry. Suddenly I wanted to go back to prison. Bastards like me don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve to be anywhere, not even in hell." "You say terrible things," Eva answered in a hoarse voice. "I feel sorry for Alex. Who can take care of him?" Meredith is gone. There's no one left to take care of him. I'm the only one left, and I'll die soon." "Don't be ridiculous," Austin muttered. "You're still very young. It's not your time to die. But you sound like an old woman." He looked at Eva, and Eva cried. She couldn't take it anymore. "I was wondering, had you forgotten me or not?" sighed Austin, covering his face with his hands. "It was important for me to know. Sometimes I go out into the yard, look up at the sky and think about you. Who else could I be thinking of? You saved my life, and this is how I repaid you for your kindness." "I forgave you," she sobbed. "I forgave you long ago." Austin covered her with a blanket, then called Alex, who was playing outside the door, and sat him down in his lap. "Do you know I'm your father?" he asked seriously, looking into the boy's eyes, which were as green as Austin's. Alex looked at Austin incredulously, and then glanced at his mother. "Dad?" he asked again. "From prison?" Austin and Eva nodded simultaneously, trying to convince the incredulous son. "Yay!" Alex suddenly squealed, jumping to the floor. "Dad's back! Now I have a daddy!" He galloped around the room like a little lamb. Austin and Eva watched him cuddling, not knowing whether they should laugh or cry. At the end of the month, after getting Eva back on her feet, Austin moved her and Alex to his parents' house in the village. The house really needed some repairs, so he decided to renovate the house next spring. In the meantime, there were other things to worry about. He needed to get a job and get Alex into school. His neighbor, Jonathan, helped Austin find a job. He offered him a job as a maintenance worker on his sawmill and promised a good salary. Austin immediately accepted this offer. Jonathan gave him half of his salary in advance and provided him with building materials to repair the front of the house. "This is for you to fix the porch, gate, wicket, and maybe fix the front of the house a little bit. I'll bring more in the spring," Jonathan explained as he helped Austin unload the building material into the yard. Austin thanked him, and Jonathan left. The man glanced around the yard and called out to Alex playing outside. "Well, Alex, Christmas is coming," the man said as he sat his son on his lap. "We need a Christmas tree." Alex's eyes sparkled and he clapped his hands happily. "Christmas tree! Christmas tree! Hooray! Are we going to go into the woods and chop down a Christmas tree?" he shouted. Austin laughed, shook his head, and said, "No, son, we'll go to the market and buy a Christmas tree there. Call your mom. Let's go right now." Alex called his mother, and they came out of the crooked gate together and walked down the street, smiling and laughing.
"All right, everyone's presentations are done," Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?" "We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs. Gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. "All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason." "What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do." "I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you." "Please." Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me." If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.